Nobody ever paid attention to the slum near the train tracks. It wasn't on maps, and the city's services never reached it. People said it had grown overnight, spreading like weeds under the overpass. The smell was always the first thing newcomers noticed. A heavy, almost metallic stench of rust, sewage, and something else. Something rotten. Jared Myers wasn't supposed to be there. He was a 42-year-old freelance electrician who mostly worked in the suburbs. That day, however, a desperate call had come in, an old man's voice begging for help. The job offer was simple: fix the electricity in a small house just past the bridge. It paid double. Jared needed the money, so, against his better judgment, he took the call. He never expected to walk into the kind of darkness no flashlight could break. The directions were vague, filled with odd landmarks. Turn left at the burned-out sign. Walk past the car with no wheels. Stop when you hear the dogs, but can't see them. Jared scoffed at first, thinking the old man was senile. But every strange description turned out to be real. The deeper he went, the more the air seemed to grow thicker, pressing against his chest. The houses weren't houses. They were stacked wood and metal sheets, leaning together like frightened children. Some windows were just holes. Others had curtains made of black plastic or old clothes. And they were silent. Jared expected chatter, music, shouting, anything. But there was only the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark that never echoed. He found the house. Or rather, it found him. A pale hand had reached out through a curtain and waved him in. The old man, with sunken eyes and yellowing teeth, introduced himself only as Silas. He barely spoke above a whisper. Jared stepped inside and froze. The walls were papered with news articles, hundreds of them, all faded, all about missing people. Silas saw Jared's face. "I collect them," he said. "They matter, every one of them." Jared tried to focus on the wires, but his hands shook. The breaker box was charred, melted like it had seen fire, but without a single burn mark around it. "I've tried fixing it myself," Silas mumbled. "But the house, it rejects change." Jared laughed nervously. "Houses don't reject anything," he said, half joking. But then the temperature dropped. He could see his breath. The lights flickered, even the ones he hadn't touched yet. And somewhere deep in the slum, a long moan rose, like metal bending under weight. Jared turned. What was that? Silas didn't answer. He just stared at the wall behind Jared. Jared followed his gaze. There was something wrong. The wallpaper was moving. No, not moving. Breathing, bulging and collapsing rhythmically. He stumbled back, tools clattering to the ground. Silas didn't move. "If you hear your own name in the dark," he whispered, "don't answer. It isn't you." That was enough. Jared grabbed his toolbox and stormed out. But the street was gone, or rather, it had changed. The landmarks were different, twisted. The car with no wheels now had a face drawn on it in charcoal. The burned-out sign was written in a language he didn't know. And those dogs? They were closer now, and Jared still couldn't see them. Just the sound of claws scraping pavement. He ran, left, right, left again. Every corner looked the same. Every turn brought him deeper. The sky was darker now, though it was barely 3 p.m. He saw children, 3 of them, sitting in a row and humming. Their faces were blank, their eyes wide open and unmoving. "Do you want to play, Jared?" one of them asked, though her mouth didn't move. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His legs finally betrayed him, and he collapsed behind what looked like a crumpled refrigerator turned into a shelter. His phone had no signal, no battery, though it had been full when he arrived. Then he heard it, his own voice, calling out, "Help! I'm stuck! Can anyone hear me? Please!" It was coming from the alley behind him. He turned, heart pounding, and saw himself, another Jared, standing there in the shadows. But this Jared was wrong. He smiled too wide. His eyes twitched in opposite directions. "There you are," the echo said. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Jared screamed and ran. His limbs didn't feel real anymore. Every surface he touched seemed sticky, too warm, or pulsing slightly like skin. He pushed through narrow corridors of sheet metal and mouldy wood until he burst into a clearing where a group of women were burning something in a barrel. They looked up, calm. "He followed you?" one of them asked. Jared, barely able to breathe, nodded. The woman sighed. "That's how they get out. Through mirrors. Through names. Through you." She opened a box beside her and showed him a cracked hand mirror. In it, Jared saw not himself, but Silas, standing behind him. He turned. Nothing. "You can't leave," another woman said. "Not until someone else takes your place." Jared was shaking now. His voice cracked. "What do you mean? I was hired. I didn't know." But they only turned away and began chanting. The fire grew hotter. The shadows grew longer. Then he saw it. The real exit. A small tunnel at the base of a shed, barely visible. Jared didn't think. He dove into it, crawling through sewage and bones, pushing past decaying dolls and broken tools. Something scratched his ankle. Something else whispered in his ear. He emerged into daylight. But it was the wrong daylight. Everything was off. Colours too saturated. Sounds muffled. People walked with jerky movements, like puppets. No one looked at him. He was still in the city, but not. And then he saw it. The poster nailed to a tree. His face. Missing. Name. Jared Myers. He was back, or forward, or sideways. Time didn't mean anything anymore. He still had the cracked mirror in his pocket. He pulled it out. Silas stared back at him and smiled, then whispered, "Now, you're the caller." It started with a muffled cry, barely audible, almost mistaken for a stray cat. At 11:27 p.m, that sound cut through the thin walls of the tiny rental apartment where Mark had just settled with a steaming cup of tea. He paused, the kind of pause where the body freezes before the mind catches up. This wasn't the sound of a cat. It was lower, desperate, a guttural wail, soaked in fear. His eyes drifted towards the cracked window, where the night outside flickered under the hum of a dying street lamp. His flat overlooked a row of Getacondas, unauthorized homes stacked like memories, built from stolen bricks and patched metal. He had moved to this forgotten side of the city just 2 weeks earlier, a journalist chasing whispers of a story about municipal corruption. The Getacondu neighborhood wasn't just off the grid. It was off the record. Locals refused to speak on camera. Children stared blankly, as though already aged by things they'd seen but couldn't explain. Mark's instincts screamed that something was wrong here, but nothing concrete. Not until the cry. The next day, he asked the old man who ran the corner store about the noise. The man, whose eyes were as pale as milk, simply said, "Stay inside after midnight." No explanation, no elaboration. Then he turned away as though the conversation had never happened. That same evening, Mark strolled further down the alley to get a better look at the condemned houses. He noticed something strange. Many of the doors were marked with faded red X's, some freshly painted, some nearly invisible. There were no lights in the windows, no satellite dishes, no signs of life. Yet, he could feel eyes on him, not from inside the homes, but from underneath them. As he turned back, he bumped into a boy, maybe 8 years old, holding a torn plush rabbit. The boy looked up at him, his lips trembling. "They don't like being seen," he whispered, and ran off before Mark could say a word. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. His tea went cold. The cry came again. This time, closer. 3 nights passed. Each time, the cry grew louder, more urgent. On the 4th night, Mark couldn't help himself. He grabbed his voice recorder and slipped out into the narrow corridor, lit by a flickering fluorescent tube. The air was damp, the kind that clung to your lungs and whispered sickness. As he approached the X-marked houses, the crying stopped. Not faded, stopped. As if someone had clapped a hand over a mouth. He stepped closer to the nearest shack. Its door was slightly ajar. A rancid odor seeped out. Earthy, metallic, like rotting copper. Mark leaned in, barely breathing. Inside, he saw nothing. No furniture, no people. Just a single, ancient cradle sitting in the center of the room, rocking gently on its own. The room had no wind, no current. His legs faltered and he stumbled back. The following day, Mark showed the recording to a colleague, Jasmine, but the audio contained nothing but static, not even footsteps. She looked at him with concern. "You've been working too much," she said, touching his arm. "Come back to the office." But Mark couldn't. He felt responsible, like he had awakened something that wouldn't go back to sleep. He interviewed a few more residents, this time under the guise of a census worker. Most refused to speak. A woman in her 50s, eyes yellowed with jaundice, finally gave in. She said the Getchakondus were built over the ruins of a psychiatric asylum, one buried by the city in the 1970s after a fire that killed over 60 patients. "Some say they still live below," she said. "Not dead, not alive, just waiting." That night, Mark returned with a flashlight and a camera. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. Perhaps proof, perhaps closure. The air was heavy, like it had weight. When he entered the shack with the cradle, he noticed something new. Small handprints on the walls, smeared in soot. The cradle had stopped rocking. He knelt beside it and found a note, yellowed and torn, with just one word: "Benny, me." Suddenly, the door slammed shut. His flashlight died. The room went silent, suffocatingly silent. Then came the voice, not a scream this time, but a whisper, directly into his ear. "You saw us." Mark ran, or tried to. The room stretched, twisted. The walls moved as if they were breathing, expanding and contracting with each of his panicked gasps. The whisper followed him outside, trailing behind his ears like a phantom breeze. He reached his apartment and locked the door, heart punching his ribs. But the whisper didn't stop. It echoed through the air vents. It came from the tap when he ran the water. It murmured from the television static. "You saw us, you saw us, you saw us." He broke his lease the next morning, packed up, left the keys on the counter, and took the first bus out of town. But even now, 2 years later, Mark can't sleep through the night. Every now and then, at exactly 11:27 p.m., his phone emits a single tone. No caller, no message, Just that sound, the same pitch, the same duration as the cry he first heard. 1 year later, curiosity brought Mark back. He told himself it was to finish the story, to finally put it to rest. But deep inside, he knew it was guilt. The shack with the cradle had been demolished, but its foundation remained. A rusted metal hatch, barely visible under debris, caught his attention. He opened it. Stale air rolled upward like a warning. The basement was damp, the walls covered in flaking paint and ancient graffiti. Names scratched in with fingernails. Mark descended, flashlight trembling in his grip. At the bottom, he found rows of hospital beds chained to the floor, restraints still hanging from their sides, and shadows, long, unnatural shadows that moved without a source. Something waited in that darkness, not a person, not a ghost, but something else. It didn't move like a living being, nor fade like a spirit. It shifted and pulsed like breathing tar, a mass that watched him with no eyes. The air turned sour. The shadows inched forward and Mark turned to run, only to find the stairs had vanished. The last entry in his recorder was found a month later, a gasping voice, barely above a whisper. It wasn't the cradle, it was what it held. It started with a phone call, one that still echoes in my ears whenever the night falls too silent. I was halfway through my shift at the clinic when my cousin Jack called, his voice trembling under layers of forced calm. "Bro, can you come to Oak Ridge? I need help. It's about the old shanties down the hill." Oak Ridge wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes by car, but I hadn't been back in years. The neighborhood sat on the edge of the city's ever-expanding urban belly, where time seemed to hesitate. Old, crumbling houses, some abandoned, some patched with scraps of tin and plywood, leaned into one another like a row of drunks, barely standing. I didn't ask questions. Jack wasn't the type to panic. The air changed the moment I passed the last bus stop. The road narrowed and cracked, and streetlights grew sparse. I could see faint smoke curling from a few of the houses, though I couldn't imagine what kind of heating system still operated here. As I parked by an overgrown lot, Jack appeared from between two leaning fences, waving urgently. "There's something inside one of the old houses," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something or someone to follow him. "People have been disappearing. It sounds crazy, I know, but I heard screaming last night from a house that's been empty for 10 years. I followed him to the edge of a slope where several shanties slouched in a half moon. One stood out, not because it was different, but because it wasn't. Same broken tiles, same rusted door, but it felt wrong. Uninviting, the kind of place your eyes slip past on instinct. Jack pointed. That one. Nobody's lived there since the fire in '98. They said it was an accident, but I remember my father saying they found the walls clawed, like someone tried to dig their way out. We stepped inside, boots crunching on old glass and rotting wood. The scent hit first. Mold, ash, and something sharper like iron. My flashlight flickered as we passed a narrow hallway leading to the back room. Jack hesitated. That's where I heard it. The scream, like a woman, but not really. Too low, too slow. His voice dropped. When I came here alone yesterday, I found footprints. Bare, too small for a man, too long for a child. The room at the end was darker than the rest. The window had been boarded shut from the inside. There was no furniture, just peeling paint and a soot-stained wall. I swept the light across it, pausing at something etched into the surface. Words. Not English. Not even letters. They swirled and looped like symbols from a fever dream, and underneath them, long scratch marks, fresh. Jack backed away, hand over his mouth. That wasn't here yesterday, I swear. We turned to leave, but the hallway behind us had changed. It was longer, too long. The door we'd entered through looked farther away, shrouded in shadow. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. Then the sound came. Slow dragging. Not footsteps, something being pulled. A breath that wasn't ours, low and rattling, like lungs full of dust. "Don't move," I hissed. I could feel Jack trembling beside me. From the darkness came a figure, thin, tall, wrapped in tattered cloth. It didn't walk, it glided. Head tilted, limbs too stiff, too long, no eyes, just slits. Its mouth opened, but the scream didn't come from there. It came from around us, from the walls, from the ceiling. We ran. The front door was gone. In its place, another hallway. This one sloped downward, dripping wet like a cave. The wood beneath our feet moaned with each step. Jack whispered prayers. I couldn't tell if I was breathing or just screaming silently in my head. A child's voice echoed ahead. "Come play with me." Sweet, innocent, hollow. We found ourselves in a room lit by a single candle. Around it, dolls, dozens of them, handmade from rags and straw, all facing inward. In the center, a circle of salt. Jack nearly stepped over it, but I yanked him back. Something told me the circle was the only thing keeping us sane. On the far wall, a shape moved. A child, barefoot, dress torn, eyes black. She smiled, and behind her the tall thing loomed again, arms stretched out like branches, reaching. The girl whispered something I couldn't hear, then louder. "He watches from the soil." The candle flickered. One of the dolls burst into flame without sound or smoke. The others turned their heads, moved, to face us. Jack screamed and threw himself backward, knocking over part of the circle. Wind howled through the house. The walls pulsed, breathing, and something emerged from the floor. We ran blindly through corridors that twisted like intestines. Paintings of people with eyeless faces watched us. One bled. One blinked. Time stuttered. My watch spun wildly. Then light. A real door. Real air. We tumbled out into the open lot, gasping, coughing, alive. The house was quiet. Still, we never went back. Jack left the city. I moved across town. Sometimes I hear that same dragging sound when I can't sleep. People say the shanty collapsed on its own months ago, but I saw a light in the window just last week, flickering, waiting.